The planet was silent when the humans arrived. Their ship touched down on the rocky surface with a soft hiss, and the crew stepped out into the ruins of what seemed like an old alien settlement. Broken stone walls and burned ground stretched in every direction, as if some great disaster had destroyed the place long ago. The air was dry and heavy, and the sky glowed faintly red from the twin suns above. Captain Harris led the team forward, his eyes scanning the strange marks scratched across the rocks. The ruins looked abandoned, yet something about the place felt alive. The crew whispered to each other, uneasy but curious. They had been sent here on a survey mission, but none of them expected to find signs of life. Then, a sound broke the silence. A faint whimper, like the cry of a small animal, echoed from behind a collapsed wall. The soldiers raised their weapons, but Harris motioned for them to wait. Carefully, they moved closer, stepping over rubble. When they looked behind the stones, their eyes widened. There, huddled together in the dust, were three small creatures. They were covered in shiny scales that glimmered under the suns, and their eyes glowed like tiny jewels. Their wings were short and folded, too small to fly, and their little tails twitched nervously. They looked weak, frightened, and hungry. The crew froze. Baby dragons. At first, no one believed it. Dragons were creatures of myths and old stories, not something real. Yet here they were, living and breathing in front of them. One of the baby dragons stumbled forward, staring up at the humans. Its voice was high and broken, but the translator device on Harris's belt crackled to life and turned the strange sound into words. "We can eat your leftovers," the voice said. The humans stared in shock, then laughed nervously. A soldier muttered, "Did it just ask us for food?" The dragon blinked and made the sound again, clearer this time, and the device repeated, "We can eat your leftovers." The crew exchanged glances, half amused, half unsettled. It was strange and almost funny. These dangerous-looking creatures were begging for scraps like pets. Harris knelt down slowly and opened a food pack. He set some dried rations on the ground and pushed them closer. The little dragons sniffed the food, then began to eat quickly, their sharp teeth crunching through the hard meal. For a moment, the humans felt a wave of relief. The creatures did not attack. They were only hungry, maybe even harmless. But not everything felt right. As the babies ate, Harris noticed deep claw marks carved into the stone walls nearby. They were huge, far too large for these small creatures. The ground also showed heavy tracks, as if something enormous had passed through the ruins recently. A cold thought crossed his mind. If these were babies, where were the parents? He stayed quiet, not wanting to alarm the others, but his eyes kept scanning the horizon. As the crew watched the dragons eat, Dr. Elena, the team's biologist, whispered that this was a historic discovery. Intelligent life, able to speak through a translator, showing signs of trust. She wanted to study them, maybe even bring them back to Earth. Harris was not so sure. He felt the weight of the air pressing down, as if the planet itself was warning them. Something about this place demanded caution. Night began to fall. The red sky darkened, and strange stars filled the heavens. The crew built a small camp near the ruins. The baby dragons curled up together beside the fire, making soft purring sounds like content cats. Some of the soldiers even relaxed, thinking they had found harmless creatures. One of them joked, "So much for the scary monsters. They're just overgrown lizards." Everyone laughed, but Harris did not. He kept staring at the horizon, where the last light of the suns faded into darkness. Then, the ground trembled. At first, it was faint, just a soft vibration under their boots. The crew thought it was the wind, but then it came again, stronger this time, shaking the stones of the ruins. The baby dragons woke up suddenly and began to cry. Their eyes glowed brighter, and they huddled close to each other in fear. Harris's heart pounded. This was not wind. This was footsteps. The tremors grew louder, heavier, as if something massive was moving across the land. Dust fell from the ruined walls. The campfire flickered, and silence fell over the humans. Every soldier reached for their weapon, but Harris knew it would not be enough. Something enormous was coming closer, step by step. The baby dragons shivered and pressed themselves against the ground. They were not afraid of the humans. They were afraid of what was outside. Harris's eyes widened as he realized the truth. The claw marks, the heavy tracks, the uneasy air. The babies were never alone. Their mother had to be near. The night exploded with sound. A roar unlike anything the humans had ever heard tore through the valley. It was deep and thunderous, shaking the ruins and echoing across the sky. The soldiers froze in terror. The baby dragons whimpered. Harris felt the ground shake harder, and in the distance, a massive shadow moved across the rocks. Something with wings. Something with fire in its chest. The captain whispered the words none of them wanted to hear. "She's here." The roar still echoed in their ears long after the sound faded. The humans did not sleep that night. Weapons remained in hand, and every eye kept turning toward the dark horizon where the shadow had passed. But as the hours went by, nothing came closer. The ground stopped trembling, the night grew quiet, and only the baby dragon's soft cries filled the silence. By morning, the red suns rose again, casting a dull light across the ruined stone. The ruins looked calm, almost peaceful, yet the memory of that roar sat heavy on everyone's chest. The baby dragons crept closer to the humans after dawn. They seemed to sense safety near the fire, and near the tall figures who had given them food. One of them, the smallest, stepped right up to Captain Harris and tugged at his boot with its tiny claws. Its jewel-like eyes stared up at him, and it spoke in its broken voice. "Hungry. More." The soldiers chuckled nervously. Harris sighed and gave the little one a ration bar, watching it devour the food in seconds. Dr. Elena crouched down, her eyes shining with excitement. She whispered that these creatures showed clear signs of intelligence. They were not wild beasts. They understood language, remembered kindness, and were forming a bond. The soldiers shook their heads, still uneasy. But even the toughest among them could not deny the strange charm of the dragons. Their scales shimmered when they moved. Their eyes were bright and curious. And when they made those strange purring sounds, it was almost comforting. Over the next hours, the humans worked to strengthen the camp. They set up barriers, scanning devices, and a defensive perimeter. But despite their caution, the baby dragons kept sneaking into the campfire circle, curling up near the soldiers. They were small, no taller than a child, and they followed the crew as if they had already chosen them as family. One even tried to copy a soldier's movement, tilting its head, saluting awkwardly with its claw. Laughter rippled through the camp for the first time since landing. But Harris could not relax. His eyes stayed on the mountains beyond the ruins. He remembered the claw marks. He remembered the roar. If these were babies, then something far larger was hunting nearby. He reminded the crew not to let their guard down, but his words were drowned by the sound of the dragons playing. They rolled in the dust, chasing each other's tails, snapping harmlessly at the edges of the soldiers' armor. It was almost too easy to forget what they really were. Later that evening, as the suns dipped lower, Harris allowed Dr. Elena to try gentle communication tests. She held the translator device near the smallest dragon and spoke slowly. "Friend. Safe. Friend." The dragon blinked, tilted its head, then repeated the sounds in its broken voice. "Friend. Safe. Friend." The camp fell silent. The soldiers exchanged wide-eyed looks. The creature was learning. The bond was real. The other dragons began copying words too. One said, "food," again and again until Harris gave it another ration. Another said, "safe," while curling up beside a soldier's armored leg. The humans were stunned. In just a single day, they had found intelligent life that could learn their words, trust them, and even seek comfort from them. It felt like a miracle. Dr. Elena whispered that history books would remember this moment forever. But not everyone felt the same. Sergeant Cole muttered that it was a mistake. "They're not pets," he said, his hand never leaving his rifle. "They're predators. Look at those teeth. Look at those claws. You think they'll stay cute forever? Harris didn't argue. Deep down, he agreed. The dragons were young now, harmless in size, but one day they would grow into something else. And if the mother truly was out there, then the danger was already real. That night, the crew sat around the fire, eating quietly. The baby dragons pressed close, making soft sounds, clearly wanting more food. Harris tossed them scraps from his meal. The creatures ate happily, then curled up near the fire, their bodies glowing faintly under the starlight. For the first time, the camp felt almost like home. Soldiers who had once kept rifles raised now found themselves reaching out, gently touching the dragon's scales. Some even smiled as the creatures purred in response. Against their better judgment, the humans were starting to care for them. But as the stars grew brighter, the uneasy feeling returned. The translator device crackled suddenly, though no one had spoken. A low rumble came from the smallest dragon, but the machine twisted it into words. Danger. Coming. Everyone froze. Harris leaned forward, staring at the creature. What did you say? He whispered. The dragon only shivered and pressed closer to its siblings. The translator repeated the word again. Danger. A sharp wind swept through the ruins, carrying with it a sound that made every soldier grip their weapon. A distant roar, faint but unmistakable, rolled across the valley. The ground trembled once more. The baby dragons whimpered, their jewel-like eyes glowing bright with fear. The soldiers scrambled, shouting orders, preparing defenses. Harris's heart pounded as he stared into the darkness beyond the ruins. Something was out there. Something enormous. The friendly bond they had formed with the baby dragons now felt like a fragile shield against the storm that was coming. The sound grew louder, closer, heavier. Dust rose into the air as the tremors shook the camp. The fire flickered wildly. And then, across the edge of the valley, a colossal shadow moved against the stars. It spread wide wings that blotted out the sky, and its eyes glowed like molten fire. Harris whispered to his crew, his voice tight with fear. The mother, she's here. The shadow above the valley haunted every man and woman in the camp. For a long moment no one breathed as the colossal shape drifted across the stars. The wings spread wide enough to cover half the horizon, then slowly faded into the night sky. The roar it had left behind still echoed in their chests like thunder. The soldiers held their weapons tight, their eyes darting across the ruins, waiting for fire and death to rain down. But nothing came. The shadow vanished, the tremors stopped, and silence returned. It was almost worse than an attack. The waiting, the not knowing. Captain Harris kept his rifle ready, his eyes fixed on the mountains. She's watching us, he said quietly. No one argued. When morning came, the camp was heavy with tension. The baby dragons stayed close to the humans, their jewel-like eyes wide with fear. They did not play as they had the day before. They clung to each other, pressing their small bodies against the boots of the soldiers as if seeking protection. Dr. Elena noticed the change immediately. They know she is near, she whispered. Harris nodded grimly. He could feel it too, a weight in the air, like a storm building just out of sight. The crew gathered to decide what to do next. Some wanted to pack up and leave the planet at once. Others argued that abandoning the Discovery would be a mistake. Sergeant Cole slammed his fist on a crate. We're sitting in a nest, and the mother is circling. You want to wait here until she decides to crush us? Elena countered with equal fire. These creatures trust us. They are learning our words, showing us intelligence. This is a chance to make first contact with a species no one believed existed. If we run now, we lose everything. Harris listened to both sides but said nothing. He was staring at the claw marks carved into the ruins again, thinking about the shadow in the sky. Later that day, their scanners picked up strange readings. The perimeter alarms blinked with flashes of high energy moving at the edge of the valley. The signals were massive, far larger than any life form the crew had seen before. Harris studied the display, his jaw tightening. Whatever it was close, and it was not alone. The baby dragons cried softly, huddling together in the dirt. They refused to eat, refused to play. It was as if they knew something the humans did not. By evening, they received visitors. Not from the sky, but from the ground. A small group of local aliens, thin figures with pale skin and glowing eyes, appeared at the edge of the ruins. They approached cautiously, their hands raised in peace. The translator device crackled to life as one of them spoke. "You have found the young ones." Harris stepped forward warily. "Yes. We are protecting them." The alien's face grew grim. "Then you must leave this world. Now. Before she comes for you." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. "Who?" Harris asked, though he already knew. The alien's voice was low and trembling. "The mother. She is not like them. She is fire and storm. If she finds you near her children, she will burn this place until nothing is left." The soldiers tightened their grips on their weapons. Elena shook her head in disbelief. "There must be a way to show we mean no harm. If she is intelligent, maybe she can understand." But the alien only gave her a sad look. "She will not listen. Her kind protect their young with fury greater than war. Entire cities have been erased because a mother thought her children were in danger. You cannot reason with her. You can only run." With that, the aliens turned and disappeared into the desert, leaving the humans in uneasy silence. Night came again, and with it, the sounds. Low rumbles, like the earth groaning. The ground trembled faintly, then stronger. Harris ordered the camp into full defense. Shields were activated, weapons powered, mechs stood ready. The soldiers' faces were pale but determined. They were trained for war, but this was different. This was something they did not fully understand. The baby dragons cried loudly, their voices full of fear. One of them ran to Harris, pressing against his leg, shaking all over. Harris looked down at it and felt a chill. These creatures were not afraid of the humans. They were afraid of their own mother. That thought alone made his stomach twist. The roar came again, this time closer, deeper, tearing through the ruins like a storm. The fire flickered, stones cracked, and the soldiers covered their ears against the deafening sound. Harris shouted orders, trying to keep his team steady. "Hold your positions. Don't fire until I say." But even as he spoke, a shadow darker than night spread across the camp. Something massive passed overhead, wings beating like thunder. The baby dragons screamed and threw themselves flat to the ground. The translator device crackled wildly, repeating one word over and over in a broken voice. "Mother! Mother! Mother!" The soldiers looked up, terror filling their eyes. And then they saw it. At the edge of the valley, where the ruined stone met the open plain, a colossal shape descended from the sky. Scales that glowed like molten rock shimmered in the dim light. Her eyes blazed like twin suns, filled with fire and fury. She landed with a quake that split the ground beneath her claws. Dust exploded into the air, and the ruins shook as if the world itself bowed before her. The mother dragon had arrived, and her gaze was fixed on the humans. The ground split beneath her claws as the mother dragon landed, her enormous wings folding in with a sound like cracking thunder. Dust and broken stone flew into the air, blinding the humans for a moment. When the haze cleared, she stood before them, taller than the ruins, her long neck arched high above the camp. Her scales glowed with shifting colors, like burning coals hidden beneath iron. Smoke curled from her nostrils, and her eyes burned with a fiery light that froze every human where they stood. The soldiers gripped their weapons tighter, but no one fired. The sheer size of her made their rifles look like toys. Even the mechs, tall and armored, seemed small before her towering form. The mother's head swung slowly from side to side, her gaze falling on each soldier in turn. The baby dragons cried out, running toward her, their wings fluttering uselessly. They made small broken sounds, and the translator sputtered to life with their frightened words. "Mother! Safe! Mother!" The enormous creature lowered her head slightly, as if to acknowledge them, but her burning eyes never left the humans. Harris felt sweat on his neck. He raised one hand to stop his soldiers from firing. "Hold," he said in a low voice. "Don't make a move unless I say." No one argued. They all knew that one wrong shot would mean the end of all of them. The mother dragon opened her mouth, and the world seemed to stop. Heat poured out like the breath of a volcano, and a sound rumbled deep in her chest. For a moment Harris thought fire would come, but instead it was a roar, so powerful it shook the ruins apart. Stones cracked and fell, dust blasted into the sky, and every soldier felt the roar in their bones. Some stumbled, others dropped to their knees, covering their ears in pain. The baby dragons whimpered, pressing against the ground. The mother dragon lifted her head again, her wings spreading wide until they blocked out the twin suns above. She was not simply a beast, she was a storm given flesh, a force of nature. Dr. Elena stepped forward despite her shaking legs. Her voice trembled, but she forced the words out. "We are not your enemy. We fed your children. We cared for them. Please understand." The translator tried to catch her words, but the mother only stared, smoke rising from her body. Harris grabbed Elena's arm, pulling her back. "Don't push it," he warned, his eyes still locked on the dragon. But Elena's voice had stirred something. The mother's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, she made a sound that was not a roar. It was low and sharp, a hiss that the translator struggled to capture. The machine crackled, then spoke a single word in a broken tone. "Mine." The soldiers shuddered. They understood perfectly. The babies were hers. The ruins were hers. Everything here was hers, and the humans were intruders. Harris clenched his jaw. If she thought they were a threat to her children, then nothing would stop her from burning them alive. The mechs powered up, their heavy weapons locking onto her, but Harris shouted, "Stand down!" The pilots hesitated. They wanted to fight, but deep down they knew that even their strongest weapons might not be enough. The mother dragon lowered her head closer to the camp, her burning eyes scanning the humans. The heat rolling off her was unbearable, and the ground smoked where her claws pressed. She let out a low rumble that shook the air, and for a terrifying moment her mouth opened again, fire glowing deep in her throat. The soldiers raised their weapons out of instinct, ready to unleash everything they had, but Harris's voice cut through the panic. "Do not fire." His voice carried all the authority of a commander who knew that pulling the trigger meant suicide. The soldiers froze, their fingers trembling on the triggers. The baby dragons cried again, running between their mother and the humans. One pressed against her massive claw, the other against Harris's boot. They looked back and forth, their jewel eyes wide with confusion. The translator picked up their sounds and turned them into words. "Safe. Friend. Safe." The mother paused. The fire in her throat dimmed slightly, though smoke still curled from her mouth. She tilted her head, studying Harris as if trying to decide whether he was a danger or something else. The silence was unbearable, stretched so thin that one heartbeat could shatter it. Then, without warning, she struck. Her massive tail whipped across the ruins, smashing a wall into rubble. Soldiers stumbled back, shouting, weapons raised again. But she had not aimed at them. She had struck the old stone behind them, sending shards flying but leaving the humans alive. It was a warning, a message as clear as any words. "Leave." Harris steadied himself, his voice low but steady. "She doesn't want to talk. She wants us gone." Elena shook her head, whispering, "No, she's testing us. She's deciding if we are enemies." Harris glanced at the soldiers, their pale faces shining with sweat, their weapons trembling in their hands. One wrong move would end them all. The mother dragon reared back, her wings snapping open again, the air blasting across the camp like a hurricane. The baby dragons squealed in fear, and the humans braced themselves. She opened her mouth once more, and this time the fire was real. Bright orange light glowed deep in her chest, rising higher into her throat, flames licking at her teeth. The ruins glowed with the reflection of the fire, and the heat blasted across the humans, searing their skin even from a distance. Harris raised his arm, shouting louder than he ever had before. "Hold the line. Don't fire unless she attacks." His voice echoed across the ruins, but even he did not know if his order would save them. The soldiers stood frozen, their weapons locked, their hearts pounding. The mother dragon's fire grew brighter, ready to be unleashed, and in that moment everyone knew their lives hung by the thinnest thread. The fire built inside the mother dragon's chest until the glow lit up the ruins like a rising sun. The soldiers felt the heat burn their faces, sweat pouring down their necks. Harris held his hand high, shouting again for his men to hold, but fear was stronger than orders. One soldier broke. His rifle spat out a stream of glowing energy, the shot striking the dragon's chest with a crack of light. The beam scattered harmlessly across her burning scales, but it was enough. The mother dragon roared, the sound shaking the camp to its core, and the fire inside her throat erupted. A wall of flames swept across the ruins, melting stone and metal in its path. Shields flared bright as the humans dove behind cover, the heat searing even through layers of armor. The camp erupted into chaos. The mechs powered forward, massive frames stomping into position, their cannons unleashing bright bursts of plasma into the dragon's wings. Explosions lit up the sky, but the mother was faster than they expected. She twisted her huge body, flames roaring again, and one mech was caught in the blast. The machine melted like wax, its pilot screaming before the sound was cut short. The dragon's tail lashed out, smashing another mech into rubble. Sparks and smoke filled the air, drowning out the shouts of soldiers as they scrambled to regroup. Harris dragged a soldier to cover as stone fragments rained down. He shouted orders, trying to pull his team back into formation. Don't scatter. Keep the shields up. Focus fire on the wings. Plasma bolts, rockets, and gunfire filled the night, the air glowing with streaks of energy. But the mother dragon moved like a living storm. Her claws crushed barriers, her tail ripped through walls, her wings beat down gusts of wind that sent soldiers flying. Every strike was a reminder that they were fighting something more than flesh and blood. Amid the chaos, the baby dragons screamed, their voices high and broken. The translator caught their cries, spitting out desperate words. Stop, friend. Stop. Their small bodies trembled, caught between two worlds, their mother's fury and the humans who had shown them kindness. One of the babies darted forward, standing between Harris and the mother. It spread its tiny wings wide, though they were useless against the storm, and cried out in a voice so sharp it cut through the fire. The translator repeated the word, safe. For a heartbeat, the mother hesitated. The fire in her throat dimmed slightly, her massive head tilting as her eyes locked on her child. But then another volley of human fire struck her scales, exploding against her side. The hesitation ended. She roared with fury, her wings snapping open, sending a shockwave through the ruins. Soldiers were thrown from their feet, shields shattered, and the ground itself cracked beneath the force. Dr. Elena stumbled across the broken stone, screaming for them to stop shooting. She's not just an animal. She's protecting them. Stop firing. But her voice was lost in the thunder of battle. Another mech fired a heavy missile that exploded near the dragon's neck. The mother staggered but did not fall. Instead, she turned her fury on the machine, her claws tearing through steel and glass as if it were paper. Harris watched in horror as another human life was lost in seconds. The captain knew they couldn't win like this. Every shot only fed her rage. Every attack only pushed her closer to destroying them all. Yet he also knew that lowering their weapons meant death. The mother was too close, too powerful, too furious. His mind raced, searching for a way to survive, but nothing came. The flames, the claws, the roar. It was all too much. Then, in the chaos, he saw it. The baby dragons were not hiding. They were running toward her, their small bodies glowing faintly in the firelight. They pressed against her claws, their voices sharp and desperate. The translator picked up their cries and turned them into words that rang across the battlefield. Friend. Safe. Friend. The mother's fire wavered again. Her eyes burned with fury, but something else flickered deep within them. Confusion. Conflict. The soldiers noticed it too. The shooting slowed, the roar of weapons dying down as everyone watched. The dragon stood over her children, fire still curling in her throat, her massive body glowing with heat. But she did not attack. Not yet. Harris took the chance, standing tall despite the heat that scorched his armor. He raised his voice, louder than the flames. "We fed them. We protected them. We are not your enemy." The mother's head swung toward him, her eyes narrowing. For a moment Harris thought she would strike him down where he stood. But the babies cried again, pressing closer to her, their small voices breaking through the translator. "Safe. Friend. Safe." The word echoed again and again, filling the air, louder than the battle. The fire in her chest flickered. The roar in her throat softened. But the danger was not gone. Smoke poured from her nostrils, and her wings twitched, ready to strike at the smallest sign of threat. Harris kept his hand raised high, motioning to his soldiers to hold their fire. Slowly, weapons lowered. Slowly, the camp fell into silence. The mother dragon loomed above them, her massive chest heaving, her gaze burning into every human at once. And then she spoke. The translator crackled and twisted, trying to form words from her rumbling growl. At last, it found one. The word was harsh, broken, filled with fire, but clear enough for every human to understand. Mine. The silence was heavier than the roar of battle. The soldiers stood frozen, sweat dripping, hearts pounding. Harris's jaw tightened. She had made her choice. The babies were hers. Their lives were hers. And the humans were nothing more than trespassers standing on ground that did not belong to them. The ruins were silent except for the crackle of fire and the heavy breathing of soldiers who could not believe they were still alive. The mother dragon loomed above them, her massive wings folded but still trembling with power, her body glowing faintly from the heat that still burned within. Her eyes moved across the humans slowly, one by one, like a predator deciding who to strike first. The translator in Dr. Elena's hand buzzed and repeated the word that had shaken them all. Mine. It echoed in the ears of every soldier, not just a claim but a warning. Harris stood frozen, his hand still raised, sweat dripping from his brow. He knew one wrong move, one stray shot, and the dragon would burn them all. Behind him, the soldiers shifted uneasily, their weapons heavy in their hands. Some wanted to fire, others wanted to run, but all of them waited for his command. The babies pressed closer against their mother's claws, their glowing eyes wide with fear. They chirped and cried, the translator catching their broken words. Safe. Friend. Safe. Their voices were small but desperate, cutting through the silence. The mother's head dipped slightly, her fiery breath washing over them. She was listening, though her muscles remained tense, every line of her body ready to strike. Elena stepped forward slowly, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst through her chest. She raised her arms to show she held no weapon. "We are not here to take them," she said loudly, her voice shaking. "We fed them. We cared for them. They came to us because they trusted us. We mean no harm." The translator struggled, catching the growls and roars of the mother dragon. Finally it hissed out words in a broken, metallic voice. "Humans, hurt, take, destroy." The soldiers flinched at the accusation. Harris clenched his jaw, feeling the weight of the truth behind those words. Humanity had burned worlds before, cut down forests, hunted creatures they did not understand. To this ancient beast, they were no different from the monsters she imagined. Harris lowered his weapon slowly, then ordered the others to do the same. The soldiers hesitated, but the authority in his voice cut through their fear. One by one, rifles dipped toward the ground, cannons powered down, the whine of weapons fading into silence. The mother dragon's burning gaze never left them. Her chest still glowed faintly as if fire simmered just beneath the surface. She let out a deep rumble that shook the stones around them, then lowered her head close to Harris. The translator buzzed again, spitting out another word. Prove. The word hung heavy in the air. Harris did not understand at first. Prove, he repeated. Elena's eyes widened as the meaning sank in. She wants us to prove we are not here to harm them, she whispered. Harris thought quickly. Prove. How could they? Their weapons were useless against her anyway. Fighting was suicide. Running was impossible. The only chance they had was trust. He turned to his soldiers. Drop the weapons. All of them. Now. A ripple of disbelief went through the unit. One soldier shouted back, "Are you insane? She'll kill us the second we're unarmed." Harris roared back with a fury that silenced them. "She'll kill us if we don't." His men looked at one another, fear clashing with loyalty, then one by one they laid down their weapons. Rifles clattered to the stone floor, grenades were dropped, even the mechs powered down completely until only the hiss of steam escaped their broken frames. Elena stepped forward again, her hands trembling as she pulled the translator close. "We are not your enemy," she said clearly, her voice breaking. "We want peace. We want to live. Just like you want to protect your children." The babies cried out again, their voices sharp and high, repeating the same words through the translator. "Safe. Friend." The mother dragon leaned down until her massive head hovered just above Elena. Her eyes were like burning suns, her breath like the heat of a furnace. For a moment Elena thought she would be reduced to ash. But then the dragon inhaled, not to burn, but to smell. Her nostrils flared, taking in the scent of this small fragile human who dared to stand unarmed before her. The translator buzzed again, the mother's growl forming into a single broken phrase. "Small, not lie." Elena let out a trembling breath. The soldiers watched in disbelief. Harris lowered his head, realizing the truth. The babies had protected them, and now the mother was giving them one chance. But it was not victory. It was not peace. It was only a fragile moment where life balanced on the edge of trust. Then the mother shifted her massive body, her claws scraping the ground. She lifted her wings slightly, sending a wave of hot air across the camp. She did not attack. Instead, she growled deeply, and the translator spat out words that made every soldier's blood run cold. "Leave. Never return." The ruins shook with the force of her voice. The babies whimpered, torn between two worlds. They wanted their mother, but they also looked back at the humans with eyes full of sorrow. One of them let out a cry, and the translator whispered the word. "Stay." Harris's heart twisted. The children wanted them, trusted them. But the mother's command was clear. If they stayed, she would unleash fire and death. If they left, the bond they had built would be broken forever. It was a choice with no easy answer. Harris turned to Elena, his voice low. "If we leave, the council will return with more soldiers. They won't stop. And next time, the dragon won't give us a chance." Elena nodded, tears in her eyes. "Then we can't just leave. We have to make her see." The mother dragon growled again, impatient, the ground shaking under her weight. Time was running out. The soldiers waited for their captain's decision, their eyes filled with fear and hope. The babies cried louder, their voices trembling through the translator. "Safe. Friend. Safe." Harris clenched his fists, his mind racing. He knew the wrong choice would end with them all as ash. The right choice might be the only chance to save not just themselves, but the future of humanity's place in this strange world. The silence was unbearable. Then, with a voice that carried across the ruins, Harris spoke. "We will prove it. Not with weapons. Not with fire. With trust." The soldiers stared at him, the mother dragon's eyes burned into him, and the future itself seemed to hang on what would happen next. The ruins trembled under the weight of silence. The mother dragon's eyes glowed like molten gold, locked on Harris as if she could see into his very soul. Around him, the soldiers stood frozen, their weapons abandoned, their armor scorched, waiting for death or mercy. The babies pressed closer against her claws, their high cries echoing through the translator. "Safe. Friend. Safe." The words repeated again and again, tiny voices pleading for both sides. Harris lowered his hands slowly, palms open, showing that he was not a threat. His voice carried steady, though inside his chest his heart thundered like drums. We will prove we mean no harm. We will trust you. The mother dragon's chest heaved, smoke curling from her nostrils. She could crush them all in a single breath. She could end the humans and erase their presence from her world forever. The soldiers felt it too, their bodies tense, their eyes fixed on her glowing throat, waiting for the fire to pour out. But it did not come. Instead, the great beast tilted her head, confusion flashing in her burning gaze. She had expected fear, she had expected violence, but she had not expected surrender. Elena stepped forward, trembling but determined. She dropped the translator to the ground and spoke with her own voice. You don't need to believe the machine. Believe them. She pointed to the babies, whose small bodies shook as they cried again. They came to us because they trusted us. They would not stand here now if we meant them harm. The mother dragon lowered her massive head closer, so close Elena could see her reflection in those glowing eyes. Heat rolled over her, making her skin burn, but she did not back away. The translator crackled, turning the dragon's rumbling growl into words. Children, trust, human. The phrase was slow and broken, but it carried weight. Harris felt the shift in the air, a moment where the beast's fury began to crack. He knew he had to act before that moment vanished. He pulled off his helmet and tossed it aside, then removed the rifle strapped across his back and dropped it into the dust. One by one, the soldiers followed his example, some with shaking hands, some with tears in their eyes, until none of them carried a weapon. They stood bare before the dragon, vulnerable and exposed. The mother dragon sniffed the air, smoke hissing from her mouth. She turned her gaze to her children, who cried again, their small voices breaking. Safe. Friend. Safe. Slowly, the fire inside her chest began to dim. The glow in her throat faded until it was only a dull shimmer. She stretched her wings, not in fury this time, but in a slow, heavy motion that shook ash from her scales. The soldiers flinched, thinking she was about to strike, but instead she pulled her wings around her children, sheltering them as she continued to watch the humans. Elena bent down and picked up a small pack from the ground. She opened it, pulled out a piece of dried meat, and placed it on the stone between her and the dragon. She backed away slowly, leaving the offering in plain sight. The babies chirped and scrambled forward, sniffing the food. They hesitated, looking back at their mother, then began to eat. The sight filled the air with silence so deep that even the crackle of fire seemed distant. The humans had shared their food again, just as before. Trust, small and fragile, was being built stone by stone. The mother dragon rumbled, her voice low like thunder beneath the earth. The translator caught fragments of her growl and shaped them into words. Share, feed, protect. Harris nodded, his voice steady. Yes. That is what we did. That is what we can do again. The dragon's eyes narrowed, as if testing the weight of his words. The ruins groaned under her massive body as she shifted closer, her head lowering until her snout was inches from Harris. The heat burned his skin, but he did not flinch. Finally, the translator spoke again, carrying her words. Children, choose. The babies chirped, their glowing eyes wide, and the translator repeated their cries. Friend. Safe. Harris felt something stir in his chest, a mix of relief and awe. The babies had chosen. They wanted both worlds, their mother and the humans. The decision rested now with the mother dragon. For a long moment she said nothing. Her massive chest rose and fell, her gaze heavy with the weight of centuries of instinct and rage. Then, at last, the fire in her throat went out completely. The glow in her eyes softened, though it did not fade. She let out a long, deep growl, and the translator spoke the words every human would remember forever. Children, trust, human, mother, allow. A wave of relief crashed through the soldiers. Some nearly collapsed, tears running down their faces as the weight of certain death finally lifted. Elena covered her mouth, her eyes wet with emotion. Harris let out a long breath, his body trembling with the release of fear. The mother dragon slowly unfolded her wings, revealing the babies nestled safely against her. She turned her massive head to the sky and let out a roar that shook the ruins, not of fury this time, but of command. It was a warning to any who might come near. These humans were not prey. They were under her watch, at least for now. Harris raised his head, his voice carrying across the ruins. We will honor this. We will protect them as we protect our own. This is our promise. The mother dragon's gaze lingered on him, unreadable and ancient, then she slowly turned away. Her wings stretched wide, blocking out the stars for a moment before folding back. She did not leave, but neither did she attack. She settled among the ruins, her massive body curling protectively around her children. The humans stood in stunned silence, knowing they had survived the impossible. They had not won a battle. They had not forced submission. They had found something far rarer, a fragile bond with a creature that should have destroyed them. But Harris also knew this was not the end. This was only the beginning. The council would come, and they would not understand. They would bring fire and weapons, not trust. And when they did, the bond made here tonight would be tested in ways no one could yet imagine.